In today's video, I'll be chatting with Tom Breeze, one of the world's top experts in direct response YouTube ads. Tom's a true master of YouTube ads. He's the founder of both Viewability, his pay-for-performance YouTube ads agency, and Ad Buyers Club, where marketers are transformed into YouTube ad buying heroes. Tom's got a master's in psychology, is an author, and is regularly invited to speak at conferences all over the world, showing businesses how to unlock the true power of YouTube ads for profit and scale. Today you'll learn Tom's repeatable system for creating high-performing video ads that really tug on the user's unconscious brain and compels them to buy. We'll also cover structuring your offer, how to budget for a test on YouTube ads, and what targeting to focus on to make sure your ad is seen by the right people. With that said, let's dive right on into the interview and start leveling up our YouTube ad skills with Tom Breeze. Tom, welcome to my YouTube channel. Very excited to have you here.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me on.
What do you think is the most common or biggest struggle that businesses have when they start doing YouTube ads?
I think people go through phases of different struggles. So I think when they first get started, it's just creating an offer that is a good offer that converts and people want it and people are happy to buy it and there's good margin in it. Like that's a real big starting point. If you don't have that, it doesn't matter how good your ads are, how well you run your ad campaigns. If you can't generate profit or you can't achieve the goal you're looking for because the offer's not strong enough, you're always going to struggle. You're always going to find it difficult. Of course, I'm focusing on like direct response activity and not like necessarily brand awareness. But there's got to be that focus of saying, for a lot of businesses, I put $1 into the product or into the kind of promotions and look to get more than $1 back as quickly as you can. You know, so some businesses that are kind of normally other smaller companies or younger companies would look at it and say, like, I've got to turn a profit real quick here because there's not pools and pools of cash sitting around that we can wait for 90 days for someone to become a customer. But the bigger the company gets, then of course you can say, well, look, we know the lifetime customer value is really strong, so we don't have to make a buck on the first day. We're like, look, that's where brand awareness or I suppose brand performance becomes a bit more of a focus, where you're saying, I just want to put goodwill into the marketplace because that gets a lot more reach. And I know those people will become customers and it'll help us grow in the long term. So it's making sure that you can create an offer that converts, first of all. That's kind of like the main thing. And then when it comes to running ads on YouTube, normally people think the most important thing when they first get started is things like their targeting and that how they work with the account. And I suppose there is, like, you need to learn that, and it's quite a steep learning curve, but quick. You know, once you learn it, you're like, oh, okay, cool, I kind of get the concept and idea here. And then you soon realize that, hang on a second, we actually really need a good ad. And that becomes the next piece, so that to complete that customer journey of saying, well, we've got this great offer, and also we've got kind of a really good way of selling it, but now we've got to get people from YouTube to go and get that thing. And of course, targeting the right customers is important and essential if you're going to run it profitably. And again, the next hurdle then becomes like, well, how do I create a really good ad? How do I create a video ad that's going to be really strong? And that could be a big struggle for a lot of businesses, you know, like trying to actually get a video ad that performs, because it's nothing to do with high production. Most of the time, like, people feel like, oh, maybe I have to create some sort of TV production level quality ad. That's just not the case. Some of our biggest clients who have created, so I'm just thinking of one client in particular, who've probably created about 400 ads in the last 2 years. We kind of did a bit of an audit with them recently. They have probably about 5% of those ads ended up having a significant amount of spend. So you're kind of dealing with quite a small proportion of videos. But then only 4 became blockbuster ads. Like became like, it's like 1% of their ads became like the massive video ad that kind of gets huge reach and just keeps on performing very, very well. But each one of those 4 ads that performed really well for them were shot on an iPhone, handheld, someone just talking through a product, you know. So that's a kind of a business that, and then they spend hundreds of thousands every month. I think they're spending about $50,000 a day type activity. So we consult with them and we kind of help them try and replicate those blockbuster ads, you know. But I don't want to make people feel like, oh, YouTube ads just is that difficult. It doesn't have to be that difficult. It's more a case of when you're kind of trying loads of things, sometimes the best ads don't need to be high production. you know, and so it's more a case of taking a step back from that and realizing, well, what does it take to create a great ad? And because, yeah, if you've got an iPhone or you've got a kind of a DSLR or some, one person shooting a video is plenty good enough to work well on YouTube, as long as you know what makes a great ad and why, and like things like the copy is important, but the storyboard's probably more important, and the tone and the feel of the video is really, really important as well. So that's kind of where we focus a lot of our time and energy. You know, once we've found the audiences, we know how to run the campaigns properly. That's kind of like the getting started piece. Creating the ads becomes the long-term kind of how do we create better ads all the time. And then offers, we're always trying to improve offers as well. But from a mathematical standpoint, like if you really look at it, like your cost per acquisition or what your kind of target cost per acquisition might be, from an ad buying side, you've got your kind of like cost of advertising or your CPM divided by your click-through rate multiplied by your conversion rate. That's kind of the formula. You can't really escape that. That's kind of what it is, you know, and the CPMs are typically decided by the marketplace. And then your click-through rate and your conversion rate is purely like from impression through to customer purchase. That's under your control. You know, you can decide what that video ad looks like, what that funnel looks like, or what that promotional looks like. And so that's kind of how I look at it. You know, I'm kind of like looking at it and saying, right, how can we control the click-through rate and the conversion rate to make that customer journey as efficiently as possible? And I think that's where most businesses struggle. And that's coming back to your question is like, and YouTube is a different beast. It's a different platform to most. And of course you need to know how to work with the algorithm and need to know and how they're constantly changing. But often you can get the fundamentals right for your video ads, get the fundamentals right for your offers and feel like, great, we've got something, and it still doesn't work for some people because it needs to be kind of a bit of a spark sometimes. The way I try and portray it is like you can watch jazz musicians like perform together really well if they're doing exactly what they should do. But as soon as someone goes improving or improvising and they start kind of riffing off each other, like that's when the real magic happens. And that's kind of what I hope for from a lot of video ads that people create, is to try and find that spark or try and find that slight difference that won't be in the textbooks. It's kind of finding something that's a bit different, bit edgy, and try that out. You know, it's and we can probably talk through some ideas around that as well. But that's where I see the struggle for most businesses.
Could you talk about what makes a great offer? Like how can a service or product business put together an offer that is strong enough to succeed on YouTube ads?
Good question. And to be honest, I wouldn't say I'm like the world's best at creating offers. I see a lot of what happens and works on YouTube, and there's different aspects of it. And I think that there's loads of people who talk about offers who are far more qualified than I am. But I'll talk about it from a YouTube ads perspective. When I look at an offer, I want to make sure that it's got very high conversion rates. Obviously, that's kind of like from all the people that come to the website, can they go buy that product? So how we maximize that conversion rate, that's one thing. Making sure that there's a really good margin in that first product as well is really important. Because if you're working with tight margins, it's always tough to make it work. So the way that you can maximize those margins, there's a few ways you can do it. One, you can look at average order value and your lifetime customer value. So what do you price it at? And there's a balance between how much you get on day zero, so like your average order value, and how much you get in the lifetime customer value, and where you want to call that. You know, so lifetime customer value, that could be a year, let's say, for some businesses, or 2 years, or 5 years, or 10 years. Doesn't matter where it is. But from an advertiser's perspective, you might kind of look at it and say, well, lifetime for now will be 90 days. That's what most programs can measure accurately. And so you can say, right, well, in that 90-day window, how much am I actually generating? And then you can say, well, actually, hang on a second. On day zero, we make $100. But on day 90, after they've bought more products from us or upsold other things over the space of like 30, 60, 90 days, they end up spending about $500 with us. It's like, okay, cool. Well, can you take more of that margin to support your ads? And if you can, if that makes sense to do that, then of course you start to increase that margin as well. So that's another way of looking at it, trying to change that mindset from being more ROAS focused, like return on ad spend focused, and be more growth mindseted to say, well, I'm happy to use more of that lifetime budget that we have front end. And it might mean that you kind of go cash flow negative for a week or two, but if you can afford to do that, it just opens up everything. And And obviously reducing your COGS as well. So if there's a lot of delivery costs and there's a lot of like, I don't know, if you're, depending on whether digital service-based business or physical-based products and things, there's always going to be a cost to deliver the product. There's going to be a cost to run the program or whatever it is you're selling. And how can you reduce those costs? Can you make it a little bit more leveraged? Can you do more online education or something along those lines to this kind of low cost, very high value for the user? So there's a combination of things that will help you naturally increase the margin. But from a conversion standpoint, what I tend to see work a lot with YouTube is selling products that are physical, digital, doesn't really matter, but something that's like, you have to front load it, you have to put a lot of value and overdo it almost on the front end to incentivize people to start that journey with you. But the things I see as a conversion mechanism or a funnel, so to speak, that I see work really well are things like VSLs can work really well. So I'm talking about like long form video content. Also surveys sometimes can work really well, or quizzes can work really well. And then webinars can work really well for higher ticket items as well. Those are the three I tend to see work really well from YouTube. There are of course other products as well. But I'm a direct response advertiser, so I like to try and get someone to buy something as quickly as possible and start that customer journey or customer experience for people as quickly as possible. When there's things like book a call funnels, for example, those can work ridiculously well. I like them. It's just that there's a human element to it. So sometimes you're optimizing the whole account around booking a call, for example. And how do you know the quality of that? And how do you know if the sales team are going to perform or not? That starts adding variables that I prefer to just sell the product straight away sometimes. So it's like no human can get involved and it's just conversion pixels and I can get on with the job in hand. But yeah, I won't go into necessarily too much about like what it takes to convert a customer, because there's loads of people that talk about that stuff. But from a 30,000 foot view, I like to look at that and say, right, can we see really good margins with this? And those are the sorts of things we tend to focus on.
So we've covered offers there. And then the second thing you mentioned was around the creative. And I know this is a huge stumbling block for a lot of the businesses that I talk to. And I've seen a lot of your teachings in the past. We've talked in the past, and I know you have a pretty epic, repeatable system for creating high converting YouTube ads. Could you share a bit about that system and how it works?
I should mention that the system's always slightly changing. We're always iterating and testing and seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work. And I feel like there's a lot of people feel like writing video ads is writing video ads. People feel like they are going to write a script and then that script is where all the power is. And I've heard a lot of people talk about it like that. And actually, it's just not true. It's just not true. It's crazy. Like, of course, good copy is going to help. But how many times have you seen a video online and thought, what great copy. They've really said the right words at the right time. Like, no one ever thinks of it like that. Like, it's not like someone's reading a video. There are, of course, like VSL that kind of sometimes actually have text on the video, the kind of the old school ones. But the best ads we see have got very little to do with the actual script itself. Like there's an amazing ad. This really rung home true when I saw an ad by Masterclass, and it was Gordon Ramsay doing a cooking class. And for the first 23 seconds, I think it was, he doesn't even say anything. Apart from the first second, he says, watch closely, something like that, or watch this. He just says two words immediately in his very commanding Gordon Ramsay voice, and so it feels like, well, now I have to. and then it's 23 seconds of him just chopping and the music going in the background and all the food looking incredible. And about 15 seconds in, you're like, yeah, I want to become a top chef. That's exactly what I want to do for the rest of my life. It's so compelling, but no words are said. So the visuals and the music and everything that goes with it is, and the psychology behind it is so important. And that's kind of where we get started, is to say, what do these customers actually want? And if we get that right, the script kind of writes itself and the storyboard comes together as well, because you start getting all these ideas coming through as well. And so I can probably, if you would like, I can walk you through a model that would be useful. I've got some slides or a slide I can share with you.
Yeah, I'd love that. Please go ahead and share.
So this is a slide that kind of like frames this up quite nicely, I think. So really, when we're kind of creating ads to begin with, we've got kind of the psychology comes first. Like that's the first thing to start focusing on. Like when we work with clients, we do a deep dive into this and we understand everything about their customers. And when we've got that, we feel like we've got pretty much 80% of it done. It's really quite easy. And then once you've got that information, you take it through to a storyboard. So you're saying, right, we break it into 3 acts and we say, right, the first act, we're really stoking the desires of the customer. So the visuals need to really represent that. In the second act, we're becoming a little more logical and we're putting that argument together to say, well, here's why you can justify why you want this thing. Because in act 1, you get them thinking to themselves, I really want this product, or I really want to be part of this thing. And then, but that's what your unconscious mind feels. And then in act 2, you're starting to talk to the conscious mind, which is much more logical. And it says, until a few of these boxes are ticked, I'm not ready to move forwards. So your conscious part of your brain will be thinking about things like credibility, it's wanting to have some really clear methodology, and make sure any objections it might have has been handled. And then once you've got that, you can move into act 3, where you start to really build tension to your viewer. So you're starting to put that tension on them to say, here's the call to action. Here's other people just like you doing this. This is what you stand to gain or lose if you don't do this. And you start to put a countdown timer in the video as well. So those are like, you go from the psychology first into a storyboard so you can kind of start to visualize this whole thing coming together. And then, and only then, you start to script this thing out, you know. So it's, the script comes last. And really I wouldn't say it's an afterthought, because you still want to have good copy and some great hooks and things like that. But you're gonna be doing that work beforehand and knowing what those hooks need to be around before you get to the point of scripting. So that's kind of a 3-step process to get there. But I think that the most important thing for us to probably focus on is this side, which is the psychology angle for this. And really, as you can probably see, it's not necessarily designed beautifully, because it's more of an internal model that we work with. One day I'll get this like sexied up, but right now it is what it is, and we just use it internally. But this has kind of been the way we go about creating video ads for clients for a long time. Some of this has been unconscious to us even, so we've kind of really worked on this to kind of make this into a process. But you start in the middle, right? So we talked a little bit about offer, make sure that's right. But your offer here needs to be so compelling that people think, great, this is a great offer. And also it's got a YouTube audience for it as well. So the people on YouTube, if you're selling products on YouTube, the 2 main audiences you'll tend to find for cold traffic will be your search-based audiences. And then you'll also have your interest-based audiences or your broader audiences as well. I call those store shoppers and window shoppers, and we can talk about that another time. The search audience and the interest-based audiences are the cold traffic on YouTube. And really, if you want to really grow and scale on YouTube, you need to make sure there's some level of interest from both of those, or one of those, you know. So if you're selling like really heavy machinery, like diggers and trucks and things like that, YouTube's not going to be the place for you. You know, there's probably a lot of content around that, but there's not buyers on YouTube for that. Or a lot of like, if you were running a B2B offer and you had to get through to a big corporate head of procurement in order to make your sale, that YouTube's not the right platform for you. It's great to consumers, you know, who are searching for answers to problems or have a level of interest that you can target them on. That's kind of like the bread and butter of YouTube. So with that offer in place, we'll start with benefit. Like, this is the obvious things to say, right, what is the benefit to the customer? Like when they own your product, when it arrives on their doorstep, or they've just purchased your product, like think about the journey that someone goes through in the short, medium, and long term of owning that product. Like, how does their life change? What problems go away? What problems get solved? How do they feel about themselves? Or what's the kind of the tangible end result, the quantifiable end result? Like, how can you say, our product has become successful when this happens for you? Like, what is that moment? And that's the benefit here. We need to make sure it's quantifiable so people feel like the product has done the job it's meant to do. You know, so if you're selling a chair that helps, or a kind of an office chair that helps with back pain, then you need to make sure that you say, right, when does the back pain get alleviated if you buy this chair? Like, does it happen on day 1 or day 7 or day 14, or when is it? When does my back feel better? And that's really important to clarify that so people know what this product delivers on. Then with that benefit, we also want to think about the desire of the customer as well. So what we want to make sure that we know is that really we've got to tap into the deep-rooted desires we all have within us. So if you see a really fancy SUV or a 4x4 vehicle being advertised on TV, very rarely will those adverts ever tell you anything about the features of the car. You know, they'll never say, oh, it's got great mileage and it's a really safe car, or it's a really, I don't know, whatever. They're not going to push on the features of that car. Instead, what they do is they show you the car doing its thing. So if it's a 4x4 vehicle, they're going to show you it going off-roading. They're going to show you going up these mountains that you're never going to drive on. But you see it and you're like, oh my word, that looks so cool. And that's really what the advert is doing. It's trying to capture the hearts and feelings and emotions of the customer that's likely to be in the market for a car like that, or a brand like that. So when you see it going off-roading and finding the secluded beach and the driver gets out and goes surfing, you think, that's who I want to be. That's really cool. Like, yeah. And that's what you're doing, is you're tapping into people's deep-rooted desires. You know, that's what most people forget to do. You know, they don't even realize they need to do it to begin with. But so many customers fail, or so many brands fail on this. They don't make that clear. And that's the promise you're kind of making to your customer. You're saying, if you buy this product, we promise you'll feel this. And that's what you've got to get clear with, and let your user know that as well. They don't need to know it necessarily fully consciously. They don't need to reply it to you and verbatim, but they've got to feel like, I buy this, I get this result, and I'm going to feel like this. You know, and that's really important that people feel that. So you can probably think of loads of different products that have been the logic sell, but you're not aware of what emotion you're going to feel around it. But those emotions are deep rooted within us, and there's only a few. There's probably about 20 or so different emotions that we could all feel. But the car one, that 4x4 vehicle, that'll be the sense of adventure. That's what loads of people want to feel. They want to feel like, oh, I want to go and do things. I want to have an adventure. I want to do something different. The sorts of people that go camping, the sorts of people that go hiking, the sort of people that go on skiing holidays or do extreme sports or anything like that. They're looking for adventure. They're looking to do something different. And it's a deep, innate emotion within nearly all of us. And that's what the car is promising us. They're promising us, you know, that feeling that you always want to be adventurous? This car will do that for you. And it's like, I see where this car fits into my life. I see where if I let that car into my life will be better. And I think of it like worlds like that sometimes, where I'm thinking, if you let this person or this product or this brand into your life, why do that to begin with? And that might be due to the benefits. But then I get to feel what it'd be like to have this thing in my life. And will that make my life better? Will that make my world better? Yes. Okay, cool. It's very likely now that you've done 90% of the heavy lift of getting someone to buy your product. So it's good to understand what your customers really want, like deep down. Is it a sense of security, certainty? Is it a sense of adventure? Is it just more excitement in their life? What is it? Do they want love? Do they want romance? Do they want, like, if you really understand your customer and think about what emotions they really want, and you can hear it in the reviews. So if you ever read Amazon reviews or product reviews, people say things like, especially positive and negative, the most extreme ones. Positive ones, they'll say, this is the best product ever. I finally did this, or I finally was able to do this. And you can normally extrapolate the emotion out of that. Or someone buys the products or your competitor's products and they say, I really thought it was going to make me feel like this, but it really failed. And you're like, okay, cool. That's the emotion they want to feel. And if you can tap into that and promise them that, then you've done so much of the heavy lifting of the actual ad and the whole customer journey from the moment the videos begin. So then once we've got benefit and desire, we move on to identity. And this is an important piece, because we've all bought products that we want to show off. You know, we've all bought products like watches or cars or things like that. A very public purchase. It says something about you. You know, we're kind of borrowing that brand. So there's certain cars, and this is like, I've done psychology for a long time. This is kind of I studied at university and carried on to do my master's, and you do a lot of self-analysis as well, and it's not always pretty what you find out about yourself sometimes as well. But the identity is like, there's certain cars I would never drive, and that's at both ends of the spectrum, right? There's certain cars I would never drive at the lower end of the spectrum, and there's certain cars I would never drive at the higher end of the spectrum. I am not a Ferrari guy or a Lamborghini guy. That's just not me, right? If I was to ever buy one of those cars, my friendship group, my status group, they'd be like, what on earth are you doing with your life? And it just wouldn't fit very well for me, my identity. And likewise, there's be other cars that I just wouldn't buy as well, because I have a certain criteria in my mind of where I'd fit in. So to speak, my identity fits that sort of brand. And that goes for every single brand. Like, what you buy says something about you, and especially if it's public facing, you know. But that's great, because that also means that people believe that if they buy this product, or they buy into this brand, or they buy into this person, they get to be someone. They get to become someone different, someone new, or confirm their current status, you know. So there's an identity that someone can, they'll elevate their own identity through the purchase they're making with you. And again, that allows people to feel like, not only do I get this problem solved and I get this benefit, I also feel amazing, but maybe I become someone as well. Maybe I become someone new. That would be great to feel that as well. And people are striving for that all the time. They want to be seen by other people as in a desirable identity, you know. So again, we want to show that. And you can start to see how that storyboard will start coming together now, can't you? You can start to see, right, if I need to show them desire, then I might need to show them adventure. Great, let's get into an adventurous setting. And then identity, like, who are they going to become? We'll show them who they're going to become. Like, what will they look like? How they sound, how they feel, like what will they doing in their lives? And the storyboard starts painting the picture to itself. To then we move into the second ring here, which is like the status. This ties in nicely with identity. So once you become that person individually, the status is like, well, what group do you become part of? Whether that's publicly known or not, you start to become a part of something. So if you buy a certain car, then, just because we're talking about cars, if you buy a certain car, then you're saying, I'm one of these people now. And you can group yourself together and say, well, people like us, we're all together. We buy this sort of car. Like, what are those sorts of people buy? Like, what are they doing? Like, they can see themselves as a unit. Now, sometimes that's very public. Sometimes it's like, I bought into a certain membership group or a community or something that's very, very overt. It's there, but sometimes it's not clear. But people will own a level of this and start to generate their own status around this as well. So this happens everywhere. Fashion is a great one. If you went to a very important dinner, for example, you're going to be concerned about what you're wearing, about, am I going to fit in here? And that's the whole thing. Are you going to fit in? Like, is it a black tie event? Oh, and there I need to go over my tux. Or is this going to be just a smart casual? And everyone worries about what smart casual actually means, because you're going to get there and be like, am I going to look right? I don't know. Am I going to look too smart, or am I going to look too casual? So it's things like that. It's like fitting into a certain group. Like, I want to fit in. I don't want to necessarily stand out, but some people are happy to stand out and want to stand out, and some people want to fit in, you know. And there's two different types of group here. You've got one where people do want to stand out and want to, it's a feeling of dominance sometimes for that group, and then like a elite group, so to speak. And then you'll have also other groups which are more of a belonging feeling, like I want to be part of something, a part of a bigger movement, and together we're stronger. So there's kind of two levels of status there that you can play into based on your brand. But as soon as people understand this and understand, like, they become part of something, there's an us, there's people like us, it's normally new to them as well. So as the presenter or the brand, you get an opportunity to explain what the values are of that group, like what's important to that group, what do they stand for, what do they stand against, because really this comes into the behavior now, and saying, because people want to know how to behave. Like, when I join that group or I become part of this group, I have to adopt these values. I have to think, and they want to adopt these values of the group as well. Like, how do I think? Like, what do we stand for? What do we stand against in this group? But also, it means that I also need to know how to behave when I'm part of that group as well. Like, because really and this comes from like, a great phrase comes from Seth Godin, who says, a big part of marketing is all about people like us do things like this. And that's kind of what we're really pulling on here, is we're saying people like us, the status, we do things like this, which is the behavior. But you have an opportunity as a brand owner to decide what those behaviors are. What does good behavior look like? What does bad behavior look like? And we like, you do this if you ever do your company goals, or you kind of do the values of your company and things, you start to focus on this and say, well, what does good behavior in our company look like, and what does it not look like? And it'd be the same thing for any brand. You can say, here's, whether it's conscious, whether it's unconscious, or whether it's like subtly put out there, it can be like, here's what good behavior looks like. If you want to be part of this status group, if you want to be part of our group, if you want to be part of this movement, this is what good behavior looks like. This is what bad behavior looks like. You get the opportunity to do that. And it allows your customers to feel a sense of ease, like, cool, I know what the boundaries are now. I feel comfortable being part of this, as well as it makes people feel like, well, in any scenario, I know how to behave to align with my status group, to be part of my group. I know how to behave. And if you can tie that in nicely, normally there's a tying in of saying, well, now we can start to build some tension around this, which is really where we start to move into the call to action. Because the tension for people is saying, I want this identity. I want to be part of this type of group. I align with the values that this group has. And now I have to behave in the right way as well. I have to take action in the right way. And you can align that identity with the call to action to say, if you do this, great, you're part of the group. If you don't do this, you're kind of confirming that you're not really part of our group. It needs to be done carefully, and it needs to be done right, because you can manipulate people, and it's not a great thing to do, of course. And it will never pay off in the long run. So you want to make sure it's done with honesty and integrity, but it's natural as well to say, right, well, if you behave like this, you're one of us. And if you don't behave like this, you're probably not one of us, which is fine too. It's just, this is a decision point. And that's where the tension comes. So it's like saying, are you in or out? And that's really the tension of the ad. And that's the way to, I mean, as we know, scarcity is such a powerful persuasion method. But scarcity is done normally for things like, oh, time's running out, or limited seats, or scarce knowledge or something. But this is saying, this is adding that tension and pulling on that level of scarcity to say, you're running out of time to make this decision. Are you going to be this person or not? And that's evergreen. That's like, it doesn't, like, you're not running out of time on something. It's like saying, this is a tension right now that you can pull on for a lot of people. And so that's kind of like, I'm sure you can start to feel like how this video would come together as you start doing this. And then around the edge here, in the red ring here, we've got like financial, personal, strategic. And these are normally the objections that people have. Like, financially, I can't afford it, or is this the right time? Personal is like, I can't do it. I'm not one of these people that can actually do this thing. And strategic is almost like, well, will this fit with what's currently going on in my world? You know, so I always think of, like, let's say, for example, if you're selling CRM software, for example, financially, can this business afford it? Personal might be, oh, I don't know if I can actually install this properly. This is kind of looks a bit more complicated. I'm not the sort of techie person to be able to implement this. And then strategic would be like, well, is this even right for the business? Like, it sounds great, but really when it gets down to the nitty gritty, will this actually help? And so you can kind of think about these, and you need to pre-handle these in your video ads. So you need to make sure you tackle these objections kind of head on, and almost like build a whole thing around it, to say like, oh, we have this structure to make sure that anyone can do this, anyone can afford it, and anyone can fit this in with their current business model. I don't know, that was a bad example, but you can kind of get the idea. You're tackling those objections head on. And once you've got all of this down, the psychology of the viewer now becomes, well, unconsciously, this big part of the emotional side of me, I want this, I'm in, I've bought in, I want it. I don't know why I want it, but it said it gives me adventure, so I'm in. And now everything around this, I get to become part of a group, and I get to become something bigger than myself, and all these objections are handled. And now the tension comes on that I've got to go and do this now, otherwise I'm not part of this group, or don't fit in. It doesn't take long to put all that together into a 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute ad or something, to get someone to take action. And that's kind of like where we get started. If you can build those assets out and think about this and know what the structure of the ad should look like, then when you go into the storyboard, you start to think, well, I know what I'd roughly say in each section of the video. And then your call to action, you can be very clear with saying to people, right, this is the action I want you to take. And so it kind of, well, once that storyboard's fleshed out, then the call to action and the script kind of writes itself. It's not too difficult once you've done this work. And so that's really, I think, the piece that most people miss is this opportunity to create ads through this method.
We've talked a fair bit about the creative side of things. I'd love to just dive in quickly to some of the more nitty-gritty media buying aspects of things. So let's talk a bit about testing budgets and testing time lengths, that kind of thing. So something that I get asked a lot that I'd love to hear your opinion on is when a business comes to YouTube ads for the first time, what should they budget for a test, and how long should they test for? And how many videos do you think they should test before they've reasonably given it a good shot?
Yeah, it's a really, really tough question to answer because it's going to depend on the business. I like to try and start with the lowest hanging fruit to begin with. I think that's a good place to get started if you're brand new to YouTube ads. If you've got remarketing traffic and you've got a lot of traffic going to your site already, that can be a great place to get started. I'm not a big advocate of running remarketing ads because it doesn't give a true representation of what potential there may be on YouTube for you from cold traffic, because you're just getting back in front of people that have already come to one of your assets like your website or somewhere else. But if there's like low-hanging fruit, you've got a big YouTube channel, or you've got a really popular website or a blog or something along those lines, then great, you might already have a pre-built remarketing audience just ready to go. So it'd be silly not to go and try that, because it's probably going to give you the best results, to get started. And it's good to get some good data through the account anyway. But then I'd start to look and say, well, is this product a very searched product? Do people look for this immediately? And if so, I'll start looking at things like placement targeting, which is where you choose individual videos you want to get your ad in front of. There's lots of software that can help to find lots of placements quickly. One of my favorites is adzula.com. That's a great one. And Adzula is great at finding loads and loads of placements very quickly, like thousands of them, very relevant ones as well. So that's a great place to get started. I still love placement targeting. And there's also keyword targeting. So keyword targeting is great because you can obviously get in front of people who are searching for your product on YouTube, but also the way that it works is quite contextual. So you don't want to just choose the Google style keywords. You also want to create YouTube style keywords. And that would be more like kind of more resonant with the titles of videos on YouTube. So I kind of play around with that quite a bit. I'll go and grab loads of titles of videos on YouTube and just see what works. So it might sound a bit crazy, but it might be on piano. It might be like fast ways to learn piano in 6 days or something along those lines. That might not work on Google, but it could work really well on YouTube. So these random keywords, or key phrases, I should say, can still perform really well. That's probably where I get started. And I'll probably, depending on your CPA, like your target CPA, so your cost per acquisition, let's say, for example, you're doing lead gen, and your lead gen, let's say, for example, you're looking to get $10 per lead. If that was the case, then I'd say in order to really support the account or the campaign, you need to do like 7x that. So you probably want to do like $70 a day. I wouldn't say that's the absolute minimum. You could probably go less than that, but if you had the budget to do that, that'd be like optimal at the low budget. To say $70 for a campaign looking to get $10 leads means you're giving the algorithm enough space to do its thing. And then you'd probably need to give it a week of data before you can really, because it's got a learning phase. And you don't want to kind of make too many wholesale changes during that learning phase, because it's go back and start relearning again. And the more you ask of the algorithm to keep on relearning, the more peaks and troughs you'll get with your CPMs. So your costs will go up and down, and you're going to disrupt its flow a little bit. So I would say that you want to budget, what would that, like if it's $10 a lead, $70 a day for a week, that's about $500 or something, would be a really reasonable test for search traffic. And if you parked $500 for that, then I would say that's a plenty good enough budget to test out some keywords or some placements, for example, and get started there. That's kind of, I'm kind of coming up with a rule of thumb on the fly here, because I don't necessarily have a set, like, here's how much I'll budget, because typically some businesses come to us and like, well, we've got endless budget if you can make it work. And I'm like, well, fine, I'll make it work. And I might lose some money for a week or two, but then we'll figure out what does work and then dial down. And I'm more against the clock. I just want to get results as quickly as possible. But I realize that some businesses are like, I've got $20 a day. Where do I spend that? And what do I do with it? So I'd say remarketing and placement targeting will probably be best to get started there for that. And because it's so granular, then when you do find a keyword or a placement that does work, you can draw data from that. And you'll be like, okay, cool. That's really useful to know. I'll then get more placements like that, or I might test out that as a keyword, or start to understand more about your customer as you go. But that's budgeting, how I tend to look at it. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, it does indeed. Yeah. And you touched on targeting a bit there as well, which is another thing I wanted to ask you about. So what do you see as working right now in terms of targeting on YouTube ads, and where's the money at right now for targeting?
Good question. So again, different for different accounts. So we're really fortunate. What we do as an agency is we work with brands and we run their accounts, and we do it for a lot of different accounts. But that's like our methodology. We know what works for us, right? And we'll go through a constant journey of like exploration and find out what works and rewrite our standard operating procedures. But if you looked at any of our campaigns from all the clients we've got, there'd be lots of similarities, of how we build it. Once you're into it, you start to realize certain things work and certain things don't. So everyone's got its nuances, but we have a methodology. We also have a really fortunate position where at Ad Buyers Club, we get to see hundreds of ad accounts all run in completely different ways. I say really different ways. There's a theme to them, but what one business will do will be different to the next business, but both can work really well as well. So that's always quite fascinating to us, because we can learn a lot from that, and a lot of people doing it in ways we'd never thought of doing it before. And we're like, that's interesting. As a general theme, what we tend to find works really well is that in the early days, as we talked about, placements and keywords can be always really good for a lot of search-based businesses. Low cost, get your feet under the table and start actually getting some results coming through that will help you. You've proven out your offer can convert profitably. You're like, great, that's good news. You've got some ads that work. Great, that's working. Great, now you can move into bigger targeting potentially if there's margins for it. But as soon as you migrate past that or evolve past that, the big areas that we look to try and get some more scale will be things like in-market audiences are great. We love those. Affinities can be great, but they're normally kind of touch and go. If you've got a very broad appeal and a great margin and great ads and a great offer, go broad. The algorithm's good enough now to be able to support that. So that's really exciting. I wouldn't say broad gives you reliable huge scale. You can get huge scale with it, but you might have it for 2 weeks, then you have to go back to the drawing board and start some new things again. But then you might look at, so in markets I really like, YouTube are starting to get really good with, they keep on changing the name of them, but I think they're calling it in-market autos or auto-generated in-market audiences. They changed the name to segments as well. So basically what they're doing is they're getting to these points where they're building you, based on the data you've already got, they'll suggest little in-market audiences for you. And really they're kind of custom audiences built off the back of 5 keywords or something with high purchase intent. And some of those can work really well as well. So I like those. That's really good. I like custom audiences and going for those. And whilst I still like placements and keywords, I feel like YouTube and Google are moving away from that activity and moving into like a flock or federation league of cohorts. And so everything's going to become a little bit more segmented down. And as users, we're going to be put into like tiny little in-market audiences and segments. And that's kind of where I foresee it going. So I'm looking more in that direction than I am constantly looking at placements and keywords. But when you find some of those that work really well, they can be very profitable and can scale pretty considerably as well. So we don't tend to go always to affinities every single time. If there's some that fit there, great. And one of the areas that's untouched by so many brands is topics. Topics are great for YouTube. We really like topics. So I'm kind of saying everything works. Everything's worth a try, I think, and just go with what you see out there. But we see, again, some bigger brands will go for like life events and detailed demographic data that can be really powerful. So anything can work. It's just that be aware that there's a balance, right? So if you're going for more search-based traffic, you'll probably have higher conversion rates, but your CPM will be higher. So you might level out that CPA. Whereas if you're going for like an in-market or slightly broader audiences, the CPM will probably drop, so it's lower cost of advertising, but your conversion rate will drop as well. But then again, that CPA can play out in the same way. And so I think there's an argument to say, well, break those two out into different accounts. So run a search-based account and an interest-based account. And as long as you share the pixels across the MCC or the client center, or the MCC is what I call it, but I think it's called a manager account now, then you can have two different accounts running for different types of audience targeting. And that can just give you more clarity about what's working. Because sometimes when you look at the whole account and CPMs are going up and down and things, you want to know, is that happening inside the campaign or is that happening inside the whole account? It's important to distinguish that. Because if it's in the whole account, then it may just be due to the fact that you spent some more money on broader audiences for a little while and then you went back to search-based audiences. And that's the reason for the CPM changes. But sometimes it can be the fact that the CPM changes within inside an account, and that's normally overdoing it with the algorithm. So you're testing the algorithm too hard, and all of a sudden you're getting this point where I see it a lot where people kind of have a budget of like, let's say $100 a day on a particular campaign, and then turn off something major. Like they might say, oh, let's just switch off all mobile devices because they're not working. And it's like, well, now you've doubled the price to desktop. And if you double the price to desktop, the algorithm might need to go and it doesn't work out as well. It can't fulfill those same CPA goals. Then all of a sudden the algorithm says, do you know what? I'm gonna have to find more audiences. And as soon as it does that, the algorithm starts to relearn basically. And then that's when the CPMs can go all over the place again. And that hurts campaigns. So you've got to be a bit more gentle with the algorithm and work with it rather than just brute force your way through like you may have done years ago in Google Ads. It's got to work with it and know how it works a little bit.
Cool. So, Tom, this has been an absolute goldmine of information, and I'm sure our viewers are going to love this. Thank you so much. Now, if anyone wants to get in touch with you or find you on the interwebs later on, where should they go?
Good question. So our agency website is viewability.co.uk. We're UK based, but we work with clients all over the globe. And our consultancy side of our business is adbuyersclub.com. Both those places you can go to and get in touch with the team. And we can chat there. Or if you want to prod me on Facebook, I'm there from time to time. So you can grab me there as well. It's just Tom Breeze, I think. Search that and you normally see some cheesy photo of me somewhere.
Brilliant. Well, all those links will be in the pinned comment below this video on YouTube. And Tom, thanks so much for everything you've shared today. It's been really, really great and really, really useful.
Thank you, Daryl. Good to see you, mate.